Well, good morning and welcome. Gosh, we have another great one here for you today. Just as a reminder, in case you're joining me on YouTube or LinkedIn Live or over on my Facebook, remember that I'll be here all week with my entire series. Well, maybe not my entire series, but a good chunk of my entire series. So don't hesitate to make sure to begin to take back control and think about which lectures are really the right ones for you. Here's the whole series. Now, we started yesterday with resume and all the ways to really make your resume sing. How do we make them essentially jump out of the chair? Ooh, get them in here. Get them on the phone. I have to speak with them. That's the right reaction to the resume. If your resume doesn't quite get them all the way there, the next step is really your LinkedIn profile, which in my view has to become the essence of your resume, but transformed into this three-dimensional sales brochure all about you, and naturally driving that reader to one singular conclusion. My gosh, if I work with this person or hire this person, best business decision I'll make today. We're going to continue tomorrow with my career evolution lecture. That is my social media marketing. Once you're on LinkedIn, now how do we really use it? Whole lecture tomorrow on that. Followed on Thursday by my interview intervention session, and most of us do need an intervention before our next interview. We have to be stopped because we don't understand. It's our job to teach them how to select us. And we're going to finish out the week with a very special 11 a.m. session on Friday. That's the Ask Self Recruiter, very special live Q&A. If you're not getting your job search questions answered, send them in. Send them in to ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. All the very best ones will be included. Hopefully we'll see you each day this week. This is building your career brand with LinkedIn and how to use it for your job search. So we're going to talk about both aspects. We're going to talk about how to make sure your profile is a full out selling brochure for you, because you're a product. we can't get away from that in today's world, whether we like it or not. But also we'll teach you how to use LinkedIn to execute a job search. How should I go after companies, at least in my view? Probably a good time for me to remind you that everything I'm teaching you is my opinion. You should take it with a grain of salt, maybe toss it over your shoulder for a little bit of luck. Parse and decide what information is right for you, what information aligns with your values, and then try a few things that will change your future. Well, let's get right into it. How are you interesting? What makes you tick? Now, this could have something to do with your professional life, could have nothing to do with your professional life. And yet these are the reasons we tend to get hired, assuming we're capable and qualified. They're not going to hire us without that. But if we're that and we're interesting and they can figure out what drives us, very likely to consider closely hiring us, adding to the team. So we have to take control of the discussion. We have to begin to control how they think about us. And that's all through influence in how they absorb that story across our resume, how they perceive the story in all of our outreach messaging, whether that's email or really nice cover letter to make the argument for you, or whether what we do or how we put the information together on LinkedIn so they can essentially live a little bit vicariously by reading through our career and almost experiencing it at the same time that they read it. That's a very different feeling than most people get from their LinkedIn profiles. Now, for clarity, because we're talking about resume, we're talking about LinkedIn, although it's the LinkedIn lecture, both of these are marketing materials to position and sell yourself, to raise your stature in your profession. So in my view, to understand the slight difference between these two, the resume is really about that essence or value of your career within a single look. A lot more in yesterday's resume renovation lecture. But LinkedIn is something different. LinkedIn really is the de facto social networking website for our work life. It's really very much like Facebook, although this one's for career. Facebook is, I don't even know what that is for. But here, everything we post, we have to be thinking about someone looking over our shoulder. What are we reading, doing, sharing, attending? And every bit of it better reinforce the idea that we're at the top of our game in what we do. LinkedIn's a few other things. Now, a business person would think of LinkedIn this way, but you have to think of LinkedIn this way because you have a career brand to manage forevermore. If you don't manage your career brand, it's not going to be perceived the same way as you're imagining it. But if you do manage it, you're going to have to think about the communications, research, marketing, and advertising aspects of LinkedIn, which is all different elements of how you share story and what you might say or not say that's remarkably effective. A lot more on the messaging side of what to say in that sharing campaign is tomorrow's lecture, really part 2 to my LinkedIn lecture. So back to part 1, here's a visual of LinkedIn's network. It's a 3-level network. You know, if I connect to you, happy guy in the corner, connected to another happy person, that's my connection. But no matter what my connections do to their settings, every one of their connections are also in John's pool. And no matter what those folks do to their settings, every one of their connections are also in John's pool. Now, let's be clear. These are not my connections, but they're in my pool. Same concept as having a swimming pool in your backyard and everybody jumps in the pool. You have access to everybody in the pool, 3 levels of network. So I want you to begin to think of networking and use of LinkedIn in a very different way, because this is your arena, essentially, to influence all the people that are in your field or in those companies you might like to join, or even up the food chain in the company that you're already struggling to get your career to the next level at. In case you haven't seen me before, John Crant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru as well. So if your career brand is really suffering the way most people's suffers from poor storytelling, it's not really your fault. You're like everybody else. You're too emotionally close to your own story to see it in a new, still truthful, but very different way. And while I care very deeply in the work that I do, I'm not emotionally attached to the things I create. So when I'm creating a client's resume or their LinkedIn profile, it's endlessly, how do we get it to its most effective level? An effective level that opens doors, that establishes your credibility without you having to do it all in conversation. A little bit more on my background, which I'll also share with you throughout the lecture. Started off as a recruiter, 3 different disciplines on a desk as a traditional headhunter. That's 2 of them as national market. Simply means I could work anywhere in the country, pick up the phone, never met a manager, never met a candidate, lots of placements, all happening in conversation. Then, of course, I did a local market Manhattan recruiting role, and suddenly I had to meet everybody, and I realized how that does change the dynamic. Ended up being the national trainer for 3.5 years of the entire 7-8 year time frame. And as the national trainer, I oversaw the entire program, redeveloped it, and every single potential recruiter that would come into the system across all 100 offices, they'd come into my 90-day program to teach them how hiring actually works. Not how people think it works, but how does it really, really work behind the scenes. Of course, VP over all 100 offices before moving out to do what I do now, and that's working directly with clients, helping them raise their career value, helping them correct their storytelling. Grew up Catholic, so I can tell you, I know all about negotiating sin. There's no sin of omission here. There's only sin of commission here. So you can leave out any part of the story you'd like to leave out, including, please, all the dull, boring parts. Leave that out. Just the drops of perfume, nuggets of gold, little ruby, diamond, emerald, those elements of the story. That's what comes in. A lot of the secrets are in my book. It's a great roadmap. It's available on my self-recruiter website over on Amazon as well. It will share with you all the secrets I learned on a desk as a recruiter, how to outmaneuver all of those people you're competing against. One other element, in addition to today's LinkedIn lecture, that will help you is I have a very special version of this lecture right on my self-recruiter website, right on the homepage, halfway down the page. You can see me large. You can see the slides large. You can use it really as a start and stop tutorial while you build out a better profile for yourself. So do check that one out. Please do like, comment, share with your friends, all those kind of fun things. Last set of resources over my LinkedIn profile. Click through and you'll get a number of my articles that will piggyback onto the entire series of lectures to really kind of help you be much more effective. As much as I'm giving you so much guidance, so much direction, and I'm very opinionated, absolutely, don't let somebody else think for yourself. You know, I live at Grand Street, FDR in Manhattan. And that means pre-pandemic, my gosh, I'd get into Chinatown very, very early in the morning sometimes, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, headed to the subway. Like every other New Yorker, I've got 10 million things going on in my head. Lead, follow, get out of the way. I got to get to my destination. Suddenly I look up and I see this on someone's shirt. Don't let somebody else think for yourself. Well, right before I saw that, I saw a gigantic hog walking down the street on top of someone's shoulder. Don't know if you've ever seen one of those things in real life, but a lot of bacon on that thing, very, very large. My first thought was, why isn't this guy toppling over? But he was a very stout guy. And this is on his shirt. So yes, that hog caught my attention for sure. But boy, did this resonate forevermore. Don't let somebody else think for yourself. Put down that smart device, put down that tablet, computer, get out of the back seat, get behind the wheel, or you're never likely to get to the destination you're imagining. Begin to take control. Use this. Now, your digital brand, or your brand in the digital world, that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, we're framing that discussion really about LinkedIn, but you have to take these concepts to Twitter, Instagram, and wherever else you might go as well. Twitter, we're going to come back to that one. Why social media matters, especially in light of everything that's going on in the last few years in social media. It's where the people are. It's where the discussion is. It's where you can influence people. If you have a chance basically to start a wildfire of discussion, my gosh, that could be all about you. I'm not going to read all of these, but look at the second from the bottom. Proper use of social media, proper use of your LinkedIn profile or whatever social media sites you might use for your job search and career can help you stay on the top of people's minds with seemingly no contact. Low pressure, no contact, but I know everything going on with John or Jack or Jim or Jill, whoever it might be. So it's an easy way to keep people living vicariously until they have a need, and then they, of course, think of you. Small changes change perception, so we have to keep that in the forefront of our mind as we think about how we're going to approach maybe our social media just a little bit differently. Why don't we change the question and think about why we're going to get hired? And that may change our approach to how we'll use these different tools. As I said earlier, number one, or I think I may have said it earlier, but certainly say it every time. Number one is chemistry above all of the things. And number two is confidence in you above all other things in chemistry. And that's before the credentialing, the background, the all the other pieces that make you right. But these are the two you're going to get hired because of. So you want to think about how you can influence people. And that comes down to, why are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you? Where's your passion? Now, let's get into a shouldn't be, but is controversial retiree that just got announced in the last 24 hours. And that's Dr. Anthony Fauci is retiring after 50 years in government service. And 81 years old, and he made it very clear in his video that he put out that I'm not retiring to go play golf. I'm looking for the next chapter in my career. God bless you, 81 years old. He's like, I've got a level of energy to give, and I'm looking for the next level in my career. By the way, I don't think you have to be Dr. Anthony Fauci to continue your career. I think you have to have passion for what you do, what drives you, what makes you tick. That makes you a little bit unstoppable. And that all goes back to the roots of our story. Oftentimes, we think of the story, how we got here, as stuff we only tell friends. And yet we're so focused on this idea of being cookie cutter, interchangeable, capable, and qualified, we forget the interesting bits, and then we become a little bit sterilized. So let me just share a few things that are on my Instagram. As you're going to see here pretty quickly, absolutely nothing you see has to do with what I do professionally. I use my Instagram to tell another side of my story, because even if you're hiring a career coach or hiring someone to improve your resume and LinkedIn profile, besides, of course, them being capable, qualified, all of that naturally, you want to know who they are, what makes them tick. Almost died in the desert 2.5 years ago in this hike. No joke, but glad I survived. Careful making a wrong turn at 108 degrees up on the plateau in the sun, which adds 2 extra miles. But I was very glad to make it back, although I didn't think I was going to. So in what you're seeing here, it's just another way to showcase one aspect of yourself. So on my Instagram, while it has nothing to do with what I do professionally, it's also a drop-down menu on my self-recruiter website. What's it doing here? Because people want to know, are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you? In addition to, of course, being qualified. So you're going to want to begin to think a little bit out of the box, and lots more on this in tomorrow's lecture, the part 2 to my LinkedIn. Small changes change perception. Simply change your future by changing perception. And don't let someone else think for yourself and stop the process. Take control. You're the one that really guides your destiny and influence your way to where you'd like to be. Now, here's a visual of a little bit of the challenge, because people try to be perfect. Oh, perfect, 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 perfect. And if you tuned in yesterday, you certainly heard me say the same thing. I'll take number three, take number three. Number three, I'm paying you less. Oh, you don't want less? Okay, number two, number five, doesn't matter. You're all interchangeable. You see the problem with being interchangeable. You have to somehow achieve the interchangeable, capable, qualified, but still be exceptional, different, special. You have to somehow step out of line. And that's a little bit harder to do. Requires a paradigm shift and a metamorphosis in storytelling. Can't simply tell it the way we've told it in the past. It's our job, really, and I'll talk a lot about this on Thursday. It's our job to teach them how to select us. That's where most interviews go wrong. It's like, oh, I forgot that was my job. I thought my job was to go in and answer questions. No, definitely not. Maybe to use the device of question and answer to position and sell yourself so you can teach them how to select you. Well, we can do the same types of things across our resume, across our LinkedIn profile. And again, for clarity, resume is about catching or piquing the interest. The way I see LinkedIn, it is dropping the other shoe. It is closing the deal. It's convincing them the rest of the way that you are the best of the very best. Or the essence and value of your career on a single sheet of paper, or a three-dimensional sales brochure, all about you, that naturally drives them to that one singular conclusion. My gosh, if I hire this person, work with this person, best business decision I'll make today. That will begin to change everything. Now, before we move directly into LinkedIn, I want you to think about your contact line on your resume. It should be, in my view, a single line, not stacked up like a layer cake, eating up valuable real estate. Single line all the way across the page with your LinkedIn URL starting on the left, your city, state. No, don't need your 123 any street. We don't hire you because of that. Followed by your email, followed by your cell phone number. Notice the two things I want them to do right now. You're holding my resume. You should be convinced already. Pick up the phone and call me. Easiest thing to get to. If not quite convinced, the second easiest thing to get to is clicking on the LinkedIn profile on the far left. This will naturally get them into your LinkedIn profile. Now, if you haven't worked remotely, I don't know what you've been doing in the last 2.5 years. Yes, I realize there are some jobs that cannot be done remotely, and I'm not really talking about those, but I am talking about the ones that can effectively be done remotely. You're going to have to position yourself that you can be seen as versatile, agile, ability to seamlessly shift back and forth. And that means if we don't have offsite work or we don't have remote work, we're going to have to show a little bit of offsite interaction. Could be about the things you see on screen here that I don't necessarily have to read all these things, or it could be in how you perform your work. You could have done conference calls or spoken at conferences or various presentations, webinars, all that kind of stuff, demonstrating an ability to work remotely or to be effective at a distance. Last item to share before we dive headfirst into LinkedIn. I want you to understand what my view of job search is. Tragedy in the job search world for me is people that sit on the internet looking at job postings. And they think that's job search. Sitting there looking and looking and looking. To me, that's tragedy. It's tragedy because the person doesn't even understand they're wasting 50% of their time. About 50% of all the job postings you see are not real in the first place. What do you mean they're not real? They're posted. Okay. If we think posting things makes them real, they have to be ready to see the right individuals. Once they identify the right individuals, they have to be able to set that interview time. When they have the interview discussions and they locate the right person, they have to be willing to set a start date and move toward offer and extend an offer. All of that's required for it to be real. Otherwise, it's just window shopping. And what happens is the system becomes corrupted by how the sale happens. You only get a good deal on job postings if you buy them one time per year. You have to get the largest number that you might use, take that to your sales rep, do a little bit of horse trading, and then once you sign that contract, those are use them or lose them within 12 months. You had no idea 6 months or up to a year ago what you were going to hire today. And very quickly, that slippery slope ends up with people posting jobs they may hire someday, very little relevance on today. To me, I think effective job search, and you should check out my Supercharging Your Job Search lecture, is really flipping this on its head. Why don't we start with a statistically perfect list? And I'll show you how to make one today. Statistically perfect list of 30 companies that'd be dying to hire you, dying to hire you. The only thing you don't know is, do they have an opening? That's what a good recruiter does. If you've had success with a recruiter, that's what they do. They meet with you. They go, wow, that's a good candidate. And then they go into their little database. They do a little bit of magical analysis, and they put together a statistical list of 30 companies that would hire you tomorrow if they had an opening. And then they don't bother to look at the company websites. They don't bother to look at the job boards. The recruiter simply picks up the phone, calls 30 managers at 30 companies, and 2, 3, or 4 every single time go, we need a person just like this. Oh, you do? Tell me about your need. Tell me about what's going on. Tell me about your situation. What we don't tell them is the homework, the magic trick, how we got here. 2, 3, or 4 out of 30, that's a very good return. So think about that. Once we put the organizations together, it's simply thinking like a detective, a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes, devise the steps needed, working backwards. Well, that's not really possible, but if it was, how do I line the sun, the moon, the stars, working backwards to understand what the steps are? How do I get to those decision makers? Well, I'll teach you and show you literally how to get to any decision maker today. What's their title? Oh, decision maker. You know what their job is? To object to you, to see how you put your intellectual thoughts together as you overcome the objection. That's how they make their analysis. Get a meeting, dazzle them, have them create a job or give you a job, whatever it might be. Let's get into LinkedIn. Networking, which is the core of LinkedIn, that's interacting with other folks to exchange information. But I like this second part, this pool of contacts that we can leverage to our benefit, make it a lot easier. You know, traditional networking, we run through the list so fast because it's like so distasteful to us. Oh, I have to network. I have to network. I have to go to a networking event. Ooh, even worse, right? So we run through this list and we go, oh, I'm so done. I'm done with networking. Great. I'm sure it went really well for you. Why networking does not go so well for most folks is that they misunderstand what they're there to do. Oh, I have to go to the event. I have to sell myself. I'm going to start to bleed out right now. Hi, I'm John. Oh, I'm going to bleed out my energy just trying to sell myself. Why don't you simply turn that on its head and be the most interested person in the room? Oh, no, Jack, what brought you here today? Oh, no. How'd you get into that? No. How do you, no, out of curiosity, before you joined XYZ, where were you at before that? Oh, no, what was it like over there? And, you know, Janet, this is Jack. Janet, what brought you here today? You can be that person. 4, 5, 6 innocuous questions. They're very, very simple. And the entire time, it allows you not to have to be under pressure to say something. You can absorb all of their stories, collect whatever's valuable into your basket of goodies to take with you, information about companies and processes and people. And eventually, all those people around you are going to run out of oxygen. They're going to go, well, what about you, John? I'm like, well, since you're listening, you want to tell your story while they're giving you happy face? Oh, I can't wait to tell my story. I'm not even listening to you. My gosh, give them the stage first, disarm them, charm them, find all about them. And then when you're ready, have your best 25 seconds, your elevator pitch ready. Something that will dazzle them and keep in perspective. Maybe something as simple as, you know, what do you do, John? It's like, you know, what I do is very interesting. Pause for a moment, because actually in this scenario, I'm unemployed looking for a new role. And what I'm doing is so interesting. Well, not what I'm doing unemployed, but what I do in my profession. This is not confessional moment. This is professional storytelling that's still true. You know, what I do is so interesting. You know what architects are very good at? Architecture. You know what they're not very good at? Running their business. In fact, that's what I do now. I've done it for several architectural firms. I run the entire back end of the business. In fact, I'm looking for a new opportunity right now. End of my elevator pitch. That's probably the most effective elevator pitch I've heard from one of my clients, and that was from a few years back. And they didn't get into not one literal piece of detail about what they did, and that you fully grasp how they could help your business. And by the end of that conversation that person was recounting to me, The other person they were speaking with was rifling through their cards, trying to connect them up with someone. I'll look through the database. Let me see what I have in our company. Really interesting, really interesting. Be the most interested person, collect information, and yes, sell yourself just a little bit. We have to think of this concept of usual, customer, expected, and we've got to turn it on its head a little bit, because in networking, it's not as simple as just getting in the room. That's going to leave us in some pretty unhappy places. It's kind of the rut everybody falls into. Hi, I'm here to network. This is what I'm trying to sell. Exciting. So we have to change all that. That doesn't really work. Leaves us in a very, very unhappy place. Now, LinkedIn's a key part of how you're going to change that, because the first thing after a networking event is hopefully they go and look you up on LinkedIn, or you look them up on LinkedIn to connect. Unusual, unexpected, unconventional. Take those next steps that connect the dots. That requires creative interpretation. You're going to have to take a few chances in what you do. First question with LinkedIn really is, well, whom should I connect with? Whom would be a good one to add to my network? Let's just get right to the answer. Everyone. Let's be clear. I don't care if you're in India, Russia, China. I don't care if you're in janitorial services. None of it matters. I want to connect with every human being I can connect with, because when I connect with one human being, I get 2 layers of network behind them that I own forever. So I sure hope you don't prejudge people. You can't possibly know who someone's spouse is, or someone's child is, or someone's parent is, or someone's nephew or neighbor is. You really have no idea. Everyone could be valuable no matter what they may look like themselves. 2 or 3 levels behind them, absolutely there's a lot of value. So think of all the places that you might go that you can network, and you're going to have to be ready. You're going to have to be ready with that old-fashioned business card again, and all those kind of things. And that's going to begin to open up doors. To sum up this first part on LinkedIn, link with as many people as possible. The only negative is having too few connections. You must get to 501 connections to be taken truly seriously. Much more about that coming along. Have to be seen as a mover and shaker. Here's 2 techniques. Then we're going to show you how to maximize your profiles. 2 techniques I used every day as a recruiter. The first one, by the way, is how a recruiter builds a statistically perfect list of 30 companies. Absolutely perfect to hire you. Only thing we don't know is, do they have an opening? I'll show you an alternate method to also generate this list further on in the lecture. This is called a 1 back, 1 forward. And it's as simple as, I'm going to go into LinkedIn. I'm going to search. I should mention I only use the free version of LinkedIn too. I'm going to search for someone just like me, not in every way, shape, or form, but in some way, shape, or form. We're identical in some way, shape, or form. And then I'm going to look for people that made 1 job move forward since we were identical. I collect them all together. And for the example, I usually say, well, think of being a Coca-Cola quality manager until you got your layoff notice, whatever it might be. And so I go in and I look for other people that used to be, and that's simply a toggle choice, used to be a Coca-Cola quality manager. And then I look for people that made 1 job move forward, collect them together, and I look at their 1 backs, 1 forwards. And the first thing you're going to experience is heartbreak, because you're going to see Pepsi Cola, RC Cola, Tab, whatever else, whatever other beverage companies are out there, Snapple. You're going to see all these ones that you should have written down right off the top of your head. Absolutely. And then you'll see all these other companies you've never heard of. There's like 1 million of these food and beverage companies we've never heard of, and they're all going to be there too. Everyone's statistically perfect to hire you because they hired your duplicate. Put a list together, go introduce yourself. If they have a need, they are going to want to hire you. That's a 1 back, 1 forward. Another method of how to do that coming up a little bit further in the lecture. This one I have an actual example to show you. It's a little bit harder to grasp. This is how you reinvent yourself. You could reinvent yourself right at the start of your career, because I haven't invented anything yet. Or you could be the Coca-Cola quality manager that wakes up someday and goes, oh, I'm so done with sugary sodas, but now what? Either way, this works. Secret to this one is you do have to do more homework, more digging. It's much harder. I'm trying to find someone just like me in some way, shape, or form that made 3 job moves forward, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, the wheel is a wonderful invention, but I don't have to bang my head against the concrete to invent it. It's been invented. So we're just simply trying to find a career path that we can follow and understand. So in this case, the gal calls me up from Atlanta. She goes, I think I need a career coach. I think I don't have a career. I'm like, well, it's a little harsh. Send me your stuff. Let's take a look. And you know what? She was 2-3 years out of school, maybe 3-4 years out of school, very small window of time. And she'd done a little of this, a little of that. Now she's managing a health club. By the way, nothing wrong with managing a health club. Doesn't want to do that. I don't know how to find a career. I'm like, I have a couple brainstorming ideas. Why don't we try this? So we'll do the 1, 2, 3 forward, and we search. I said, well, your asset really, because you're just in the workforce. No. I've been working 3 or 4 years. I'm like, welcome. There's nothing here. I said, your real asset from my view is your education. So as you see here, now this search was done quite a few years back, but I said, you went to Clark Atlanta University. Let's go search Clark Atlanta University. You studied mass media. Let's search mass media. And through the magic of search at the time that I did it, they were all 3, 4, 5 years out of school. Same asset. What did they do with it in the same time frame? And it doesn't really matter where they're located. I said, well, what do you like? What do you like? It's brainstorming. Oh, events. I'd love to be in events. Oh, events at Warner Brothers. That looks pretty good to me too. I'd love to be a membership director. Oh, recruiter. Like to help people. So we'll come back to that one. Let's look up at Trish here, this membership director at this nonprofit at the Chamber of Commerce. How'd she do it? What do you think her first job was? Membership associate. What do you think her second job was? Membership manager, and voila, 3 steps in, she's membership director. So my client here over on the right, never even heard of this career path before our discussion, suddenly knows what she's looking for, which is a nonprofit or foundation. Lots of those around Atlanta, so that begins to narrow the target. What kind of role are we looking for? Member services. I don't even know what that is. Well, I don't either, but apparently they're going to love your background. Let's go sell it. And of course, she finds herself on the first step toward her 3-step goal to her career, member services at the Georgia Pharmacy Association. Now, I've been telling this story for quite some time. I have to update it. She's made 2 more moves up to director of membership operations, manager of member services and database, and then finally up to director of membership operations. Her entire career path down a road she hadn't heard of before. A lot of brainstorming can come out of this technique, a lot of great things. Can't escape it. Perception's reality. If we don't like that, that's the world we live in. We're a product, so we have to make sure we put the attention to detail. You're going to have an idea of how you want people to think of your product. How enamored with the product, how much do they desire to have this on their team? Because small changes in all the storytelling change everything, and also solve this dilemma of how you can be capable and qualified and still exceptional and special all simultaneously. We're simply going to change reality by changing perception. Now, here's a few of my shares, and then I'll show you each section of my LinkedIn profile and technically how I'm maximizing its use as a sales document. So here we were doing an event at Morgan Stanley, so I shared that. Then running out to another one of my lectures and have to share an image for that. Doing my boot camp. Now that I'm trying to get that as an online version that will launch pretty soon on my website. But here I was still doing it live 2-3 times a year. And someone captured a picture of me while I'm doing it live. Father was a Catholic deacon. I know he'd love that pose. I saw him in that pose many, many times. Up at WHCR Voice of Harlem Radio. That's really a lot of fun. That's a 6 to 8 in the morning drive time. So for me, I live in Lower Manhattan. That's up at 3:30 in the morning, so I can work through my morning ritual and arrive, in studio at 5 minutes to 6 and slide into those headphones and right in front of the mic, and nothing is planned. It's all off the cuff, which is a lot of fun. 2 hours drive time. Or the various articles that I'll put out there, all of those things I post, and all of that influences how people think. Or sometimes I'll piggyback. In other words, the radio show host was sharing the authors he had on that month, and suddenly he's sharing my book and I'm resharing his, a little bit of a piggybacking effect. Running out the door to another lecture, but I can't share the same darn picture every time, and searching for a quick photo, and someone had been sitting in my close front audience over here, end of the lecture, where I'm greasy and shiny and embarrassed by my ridiculously long email signature that I'm showing. Look at that. Suddenly got a crazy 1,500 views. Now, I exert a lot of branding control, and full disclosure, my other half's a creative director. So I do understand these elements to a deep level. There's value also in breaking your brand a little bit and also being a human being. Being a human being sells. So don't forget that part of it as well. In terms of the profile, your success is going to be directly tied to how much preparation you put in. If you really put the work in to brand your career, it's going to make a huge difference. Now, in doing so, you're going to want to think of LinkedIn, but I'm a true believer. If you'd like to be hired, you also need to be on Twitter. Oop, almost lose my lunch every time. Not the 158 tweets over the weekend type thing, but you'll notice these two profiles, Twitter profile, LinkedIn profile, they work harmoniously together, but they look a little different from one another. Maybe not the headshot. And then I seamlessly let every piece of content that I share on LinkedIn also flow out to Twitter. Why? Why is this so important? Or why does John think it's so important? Well, because you give me any position, any level, any industry, give me a few minutes to think about it. I can go to Twitter and search 4, 5, or 6 words to find the very best of the best. Oh, not the capable and qualified. It's like cat hair in your mouth everywhere. The best of the best of the best. You only have to imagine, well, what would the best be doing? And go search for that activity, because they'd certainly be sharing certain technical white papers about their field with comments. You could just Google technical white paper on my field and it'll come right up and you'll understand it. Share one of those things with good, better, ugly comments. There's certain conferences that are the conference that everyone goes to. You got to go or have a connection, a footprint to those conferences. Maybe some of your own opinions. You let it all flow across both and you realize suddenly you're very easy to find. You're also controlling how people think of you as they look over your shoulder to see what you're doing or involved in and what's catching your attention. Really, everything from your background, we're going to filter through this singular question. Does something here rise to the level to convince them it'll be the best business decision they make today? If they choose to hire me, that's going to determine what actual content I put into the profile. And yes, as much as possible, I need to center it on some sort of performance effect so it's transferable. Let's get right into the profiles, finally. So you have your new profile. You now are beginning to look at ABC Company, because I'd like to go look at a job there. You start to look at some of the people that work there, and what do they see? Well, this is what they see. If they're on the free version, they'll let you see 5 people at once. Last 5 people that have looked at you. And so how do you want to be perceived? Now, these 2 at the bottom, these anonymous folks, they really don't understand how LinkedIn works or what it's all about. There's no purpose to look at those folks. Jonathan here. Now, I don't know if anyone watching today is an owner or founder. If you're an owner or founder and you'd like to be hired in a role again, you need to get out of your own way and put your ego back up on the shelf and change that owner and founder, because we don't hire those people. Change it to principal. Means the exact same thing, but that's a person I can direct, I can control, I can manage. Owner and founder, oh, they have their own ideas. They're hard to control. Deborah here, gosh, great energy. Looks right for the part. Textiles, lighting, fashion, interiors. Gotta focus, fantastic. But I wonder what Deborah's doing within textiles, lighting, fashion, interiors. So I don't really know that. Now, Brad here, corporate affairs and communications, global reputation management, government relations, crisis comms. Oh, look, I can contact that guy. Oh, looks the part too. Of course, full disclosure, that's one of my clients. Your profiles are the world at your window. You know, if you were in retail, which would be pretty difficult right now, your job is to get people in the store. What are you going to put in that window to get people into the store? What are you going to put in your window, in your view on LinkedIn, so that it draws people into your story? So I'm going to take you through my profile and explain everything that's here. Ignore my content, but think about the concepts and why I'm doing everything. So first impressions are really important. Yes, we need to make use of the banner. No, you don't need to be in the banner. Yep, pretty easy for me to get shots like this as a public speaker, but you don't need to be in the banner. It just needs to be somehow related to your industry and not distract away from your profile shot. Profile shot, let's talk about that. This was taken at City Hall a few years ago. A couple friends getting married and hundreds of people around. Photographer never stopped us, just kept seamlessly moving and shooting. Somehow got me isolated against the poles in the background. All you're seeing is joy over my friends getting married. So yes, what we're looking for in the right picture, energy, enthusiasm, drive, passion, above everything else is presence. Can't tell you what those are, but we can tell you when we see it. It's all intangible. Little extra clarity. 3/4 shot, I can get away with it as a public speaker. It would have been far better had I been looking at camera, but again, he didn't pose. So it is what it is. Type over top of your own picture, not if you'd like to be hired. It creates a barrier, makes it seem like John's ego must be really big or something. And it'll be a barrier to getting hired. Just below my name, this is your chance to pitch yourself, not just your current or last employer and title. Snooze fest. You must have a better way to pitch yourself than that. So what do I put in here? Author and career coach, resume, LinkedIn, and career branding guru. Featured speaker at New York Public Library, Department of Labor, CUNY, and many others. Quoted and seen in Wall Street Journal, CNN, Forbes, Essence Magazine. Oh, look, I can contact that guy. Would you like to be contacted? Put your email address in the headline. It is one of the only places LinkedIn does not promptly hide it from 99% of the people. That's their business model. 500 plus connections, absolutely. Mover and shaker, finger on the pulse. And even in this first view, you get a little bit of this quote from the About section. As a recognized expert in job search, I'll share blah, 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 blah. Wonderful quote. I wrote it myself, put it in quotes. Works very well. Now, banner image, we talked about that. Get something that's useful. Doesn't have to be literal. Could be something even subliminal to your field. Make sure to have the right profile shot. That's one that is dazzling. That's one that I can imagine working with on tough projects, working with under stress. It's going to be a joy to work with. I don't know how much more clear I can get there. Make sure you have your marketing message about yourself in place, all of this working seamlessly. Happens all by trial and error. Even for myself, with all my experience, it can be 2, 3, 4 hours building out a profile with 40 separate uploads, trying it over and over various ways until it hits that magical sweet spot. Just hit your little blue pencils to do the editing and go through a trial and error and see what works. Same thing on your banner, on your positioning. Tweak everything till it works its best. Now, as you get down my profile, you're now in the About section or Summary section, which is really about 3 screens long in what I'm about to show you. It's 2,000 characters of space. And yet you realize there's no sentence structure here other than that quote, because the quote has sentence structure. Nothing else has sentence structure. In fact, look at the extent I went to with this laundry list of media outlets. Now, I could have put those in much more succinctly. What would it take? An extra second or 2 or 3 to glance this way and absorb? There is no second, 2 or 3. Running this way stacks up in the brain. It's right there, even if they only read 2 or 3 of them. You continue down, then I put a few of my lecture topics in. Then I also list out the places that I speak. Well, here's New York Public Library and New York State Department of Labor. And then suddenly here's 8 more places that I speak, but I can't just put a list of 8. That becomes a block. So suddenly you realize, well, I can't have them miss NYC Service or Rainbow Push Wall Street Project or Goldman Sachs or Harvard. I can't have them miss that. So you have to break it up into chunks that can be absorbed. Still more room left. So, yep, here's those titles I said I put in there, a few different titles. And then I roll the dice on a whole paragraph out of my book, put it in quotes so it's friendly, put my name after it, tell them just a little bit about my full service. And then I begin to attach visual elements to further the story, to firm up the foundation of the story so they see it all there. As you go down your profile, you're going to see this white activity box, and most people's it's empty. And it says, here's what you've been doing for the last 90 days. Nothing. If we're doing something in the last 90 days, the last 4 or 5 items populate right here. So people can easily begin to look over your shoulder, what you're reading, doing, sharing, attending, what's drawing your interest. When you get down to the resume portion, wait a minute, this doesn't look like a resume. Why would I have this look like a resume when resumes are not effective? They're not very effective. So why don't I simply use the space to tell story, which means I have to think about how I parse out the information down the profile. Again, notice there's no sentence structure whatsoever, and yet it perfectly works in telling story. If you glance down it, you can visit my profile on your own, spend some time there, borrow the structure and just replace it with your content. Absolutely. I group it for simplification, absorption, and then I go back through and I add just a tiny little bit of all cap. If there's no all cap, not very likely to read very much at all. If there's too much all cap, not very likely to read much at all. This is about doing the work to transform each section into something that's visually imprintable. I glance across it, it's in my brain. I glance across it, it's in my brain. Really working that simply. Here's a little quick look at some more 2-line traditional bullets so you can kind of see how that looks there. Once I get to the end of the self-recruiter story, my very first listing, I then skip a few lines and I put a keyword block. Now, most people do not need a keyword block. If you need a keyword block, this is how we do it. We simply skip a few lines, put it anywhere, but please don't put it in the summary. The keyword block is not for any human being to read. So why would you put it where someone's going to read? Just go to any one of your job listings, skip a few spaces, put it all the way at the bottom, keyword, colon, run it together. Now, you've had a lot of time while I've been speaking to read this. I don't know if you've read it, but if you did, you would have seen Stephen Covey, Tony Robbins, Anthony Robbins. Never quite know how they're going to search him. Tori Johnson, 5 O'Clock Club, 92nd Street. Why? All these things have absolutely nothing to do with. Why are these things here? It's like, because John thinks like a detective. Those are all things you could search to find someone like John. But since I haven't done those particular ones, you wouldn't find me just searching those. But now, rubbing elbows, I can come up in the search results. Very clever and still truthful. All of this is trial and error. You can't know the first time you put it in how it's going to display. Is the line break going to be where it needs to be? Almost every line break in my profile is a hard line break that I made a choice to make. Then, of course, we add as much visual to support those visual elements that position it and sell you. Yep, I can come up with a lot of these things very easily, but what I tell most of my clients is, why don't you simply gather together a folder and put in that folder every single image that ever touched your work life? Now, did you hear how I said that? That's the good picture, the bad picture, the in focus, the out of focus. That's my dirty desk. I'm not even in that picture. All of those pictures. And now, if you're not the creative person, work with someone creative that can look at those and cherry pick. I had a client recently share a folder of 50 pictures with me while they were apologizing. I'm like, no. I'm like, how could I tell you what I could create without seeing them? I'm glad to see it. And we didn't put 50 pictures up there. We cherry picked 4 or 5 of them to create the right feeling, understood the backstory, took it into either Keynote or PowerPoint, overlay a little bit of the type that tells the story, output it as a beautiful image, and their career comes to life. And suddenly people are living vicariously, seeing what you're reading, doing, sharing, and attending. Now, here's a clever way to get more keywords here. This is when I was VP over the 100 office system. I do want to point out this would be a terrible technique to use on your resume. You have a limited amount of real estate. Don't waste it telling stories about your company or throwing sugar at your company. Here on LinkedIn, we're not handcuffed by that same real estate. So I can share some spotlight on my company. It can reflect back to me. So when I talk about being a national recruiting company, 100 offices, manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, logistics, chemical, energy, you can imagine from the way I've told story, if you were in any one of those industries and you needed help reinventing your story across your resume or across your LinkedIn profile, or helped you coaching, you suddenly know exactly who could help you, and I'd start to show up in your feed. Another variation on that same technique, this is from earlier associated clients. Now, that could get you in trouble. Be careful of the trade secrets agreements. Be careful of non-disclosure agreements. I had the right to share every one of my software clients I worked with. I shared every one of them. And again, you can imagine if you ever worked at any one of these software clients and you needed help with your career brand across resume, LinkedIn, or anything else, guess who would come right up? If this technique is good for you, think about how you're going to adjust it and can help you. Now, look what's just below that. Stuck way down in the profile, invite me, all invites accepted, open networker, and lion. Would you like endless new connections forever? Well, go over to my profile and just copy this line and paste it into your profile. You'll get endless new connections forever, because that's also part of the secret of how you get to 501, which is coming up. I'm going to show it to you. Publications module. Now, most people don't use this, but even if you don't have a book or you don't have different articles in different magazines or being featured in Essence magazine, you could write 3, 4, 5 articles that somehow surround what you do professionally. Nobody wants to read, so page and a half of wisdom, probably from a wise mentoring tone. If I said to you, oh, could you talk to my kid? They'd kind of like to come down the same career track as you. Could you give them some pearls of wisdom, some advice? Yeah, that's the right wise mentoring tone. 3, 4, 5 articles surrounding what you do, and then suddenly it's captivating. That could be shared to the LinkedIn blog system, but you could put it up on any free blog, connect it to publications, and it's right here. And even if they didn't click through to go out and see the actual articles, it still has an amazing effect in selling you. Now, when I do in-person lectures, I love to go, anybody volunteer? Anybody volunteer? And someone goes, I volunteer. and I go, oh, sorry, I was interested. And then I realized it was just volunteering. And then I remind them, okay, so, but you know what today is, right? For me, volunteering. There's no ka-ching here. This is volunteer, whether I'm at the library or anyplace else. And so we have a dismissive thing in our nature where suddenly it's volunteering. We don't think it's real. I guarantee you this is real. It's work for John. So for myself nor my clients, I will not use the volunteer module. I use the organizations module. It has all of the same benefit with none of the baggage. Oh, this is how you align yourself. This is how you give back. So whatever you may have, now don't be distracted by all my dates. I'm a public speaker and I need to show dates for time relevance of skill. But most good works or other things you might be involved in do not require dates. So whatever you might be involved in, put it in here. You don't know what might draw attention. Want to point out this NYU Wasserman Center here thing. That's another variation on the same technique where I got invited in and I gave more credit to everyone else. I mentioned the moderator and Jessica and John Ladinsky. In fact, John Ladinsky was the guy. The reason I set this little piece up here, because I was so jealous. I'm preparing for the event and I suddenly see he has more followers than I do. My gosh, John, he has a 30-year career. Let it go. But I'm so competitive. But I'm thinking, not how can I get, more connections than John. I'm simply thinking, how can I get John Ladinsky's connections? I already have my own connections. So anytime someone were to put in LinkedIn Vincent or Jessica or John Ladinsky, guess who comes up right next to them based on how I told that story? Keyword skill endorsement module. Excuse me while I grab a tissue. Keyword skill endorsement module. This is 50 words or phrases all about you. The thing to remember there is you need to put in all 50. No one's an expert at 50 items. So if I've touched this laptop, or there we go, laptop is on the list. Yes, I realize that's very low exposure, but this is an exposure list. As someone behind the scenes might be going, I need someone that has this, and has been exposed to banking. And boom, they dial it up like a recipe, and boom, you're there. All of your information, as you can see here, collects in various ways further down the profile to make it simpler for the reader. But they can do a deep dive into anything that they'd like. So even though it stays very accessible and absorbable, if it's something of real interest to them, they could push through and say, oh, I want to know more about this. And then suddenly it expands. All of that text is keyword searchable. So get your story in there and let the system handle it in a very, very nice way. Written recommendations. In a perfect world, that's 4, 5, or 6 would be really lovely. I think I probably have 52, 54 written recommendations on my LinkedIn profile, not a single edit. Now, if you go and read some of these, your head's going to want to explode almost right away because you're going to see typos all over the place, grammar all over the place. Oh my gosh, didn't John see this? Of course I did. That's why they work. Don't interrupt what people are saying. Let them speak in their own tone. And you realize when you look across them all, you realize how truthful and how much reality is there. Just don't tell what people should write, because then it comes out like a canned ham. Let them speak organically. Groups. You can join quite a few groups. You need to join every group that could illustrate your skill set, illustrate your industry, illustrate the challenges, illustrate your very next career level, even though you're not there. As you join a group, all of those people come into your searchable pool, even though you're not connected. A lot of value there. Follow some influencers. Look at that. I'm following Tony Robbins. Mostly so I can get behind him on stage, give him a little push. Get a little long in the tooth, have to make a little room. Now, how do we get to those 500 plus connections to be seen as the mover and shaker, finger on the pulse? Well, it's a lot easier than you think. We go to the top of the page, which is a unified search box. And in this example, I'm going to search Informatica, big database middleware company. So I'm going to simply, well, before I do that, let's go through the 500 plus. I'm going to type in here, just like you saw from my profile, invite me inside of quotes. So I don't get invite and don't get me, I get invite me. Even on the free version, you get 10, 12 pages where you can just run down the page, invite everybody. So I would. All invites accepted. Yep, whole thing in quotes. So another whole set of those folks. I run down, I invite every single one, no thought, doesn't really matter. Accept, invite. Next one is open networker, inside of quotes. Sounds a little strange, but that'll do it as well. Last one doesn't really need quotes. It's lion. It's a single word. You're going to get a few that don't belong. I work at Food Lion. I'm on the line team of the real estate company. Okay, but most of them are going to be high volume networkers. Those are lions. Wherever you are in that whole process, take your first step and repeat. Just connect with as many people as possible. That's going to help you. Last piece for today, and that is how you get to any decision maker that you'd like. Boss, boss's boss, boss's boss's boss. Maybe it's peers, subordinates, and others. Back to that unified search box, back to searching Informatica. When you start to type it, you're going to get this whole drop-down menu. Don't click on that. Trip down the rabbit hole. Simply click enter, and you get this nice secondary sorting process. As long as I'm here, alternate method for statistically perfect companies, let me go look under companies. Oh, there it is. They hit it over there. Companies. What do I get? 34,000 companies. What's going on here? Well, after you get past the Informatica, who are the rest of these? I can tell you. This was my field. Everybody further down this list are all system integrators. They either resell or install Informatica software. If I am right to work for Informatica, I am statistically right to work for a great number of these organizations. But then I still have to find the people. So I have to go back and say, well, show me the people. What are there? 2.5 million cold and in the ground before I get through that list. I have to think here, even on the free version. Give me the ones that are really in the US, and really currently work for Informatica. Not 3 years ago worked for Informatica. And what do I get? What do I get from that? 1,615 results. Look at that. I can't get through that list either. I'll get cut off. A little more brainstorming. Maybe even on the free version, maybe it's a VP I think is going to hire me. Really US, really Informatica. 75 VPs, a lot of chiefs in that company. A lot of chiefs. Maybe it's a director, really US, really Informatica. 228 directors. It's brainstorming. This is how you work through brainstorming. And suddenly an epiphany happens. It's a sales director I'm after. Sales director. As long as I'm thinking of it, how about really right down to New York City, even on the free version? And I get 3. I'm after 3 to 5 individuals. That's what I'm after. 3 to 5 individuals I can introduce myself. And one of those is very likely going to be the decision maker. So I've got my 3, but it would be better if I had 5. So I could go back and go, maybe there's a sales VP really in New York, and I get 2 more. Downside is some of those folks are going to have this send in mail. Oh, send in mail. And then, do you know what in-mail is? Spam. Literal definition of spam. It is paid email. Please do not send it. For a person like myself, my inbox on LinkedIn is stuffed full of well over 1,000 unopened nonsense spam messages. So please don't send in-mail. I do want to connect with Nick, but if I would just load Nick's profile after they frustrate me again with the send in-mail, if I was smart enough to click the ... there's the connect. They just hit it. So I can connect with all of these people with that one-time message that I copy and paste forevermore that says, you don't know me. I'm professionally appropriate. Here's a little bit of a stroke to your ego. I like to connect with other professionals in our niche, depending on how we like to say that. And of course, I'd love to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn. Wherever you are in your process with LinkedIn, social media, and your next job search steps, figure out what your next step is and repeat. You have to get this into a session that's going to work for you. Now, tomorrow is part 2. Well, this was today, building your career brand with LinkedIn. Tomorrow is really going to be part 2 to my LinkedIn lecture. And that is really all about career evolution, using social media marketing to change people's thoughts about you. Hopefully you can join in. Thursday, 11 a.m. will be my intervention session. And Friday, we're going to finish out the week with my Ask Self-Recruiter live Q&A. Send your questions into ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. And all the best ones will be there. This is tomorrow's lecture, so I hope to especially see you then. We're going to see the interview lecture on Thursday. And lastly, here comes the last slide. Well, after this part populates, the Ask Self-Recruiter very special session for Friday. So Whether you're joining me on Facebook, on LinkedIn Live, on Twitch, on wherever else this may be going out to, please do like, comment, share, leave a little message for friends. And if you need help with your career brand, check out my Self Recruiter website, look under the services tab. And if you need to speak before you know which one is really the right package for you, send me a quick email. We'll set up a time to talk. Hope you have a great start to your day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.